Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Friday the 23rd of December. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening, I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 303 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition, and then I will bring you today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. North Korea's foreign ministry denied a media report it supplied munitions to Russia, calling it groundless, and denounced the United States for providing lethal weapons to Ukraine. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, posted a video on Friday saying he was back at work in Kyiv after his landmark visit to Washington this week. Alexander Darchev, a senior Russian diplomat, has said that talks on security guarantees for Russia cannot take place while NATO instructors and mercenaries remain in Ukraine, and while Western arms supplies to the country continue. Anatoly Antonov, Russia's ambassador to the United States, said today that the risk of a clash between the US and Russia was high, adding that it was hard to say when talks on strategic dialogue between the two sides could resume. But he also said that talks on prisoner swaps had been effective and would continue. Australia's Financial Intelligence Agency has warned Russian paramilitary groups are soliciting cryptocurrency donations to buy weapons, and that Australians have donated to terrorist organisations overseas. Air raid sirens were sounding shortly before 7 a.m. in Mykolaiv in southern Ukraine, according to the regional governor Vitaly Kim. The Kherson governor Yaroslav Yanushevych also posted an air raid alarm, but shortly afterwards said that the alert was over. The US is imposing fresh sanctions on 10 Russian naval entities over Russian operations against Ukrainian ports, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said. German authorities said they had arrested an employee of the country's Foreign Intelligence Service on suspicion of treason for allegedly passing information to Russia. It comes just days after Austria said it had identified a 39-year-old Greek citizen it suspected of spying for Russia. And Vladimir Putin called Israel's Prime Minister-designate Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday to congratulate him on forming a government and to discuss the situation in Ukraine, according to a statement from Netanyahu's office. Cutting the public funding available to support the arrival of Ukrainians is counterproductive and short-sighted, the Scottish and Welsh governments have told the UK government. In a letter to the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, and the Minister, who is also the Minister for Intergovernmental Relations, Michael Gove, the Scottish Government's Minister with Special Responsibility for Refugees from Ukraine, Neil Gray, and the Welsh Government's Minister for Social Justice, Jane Hutt, have called for the funding decision to be revisited. They also called for appropriate engagement with devolved governments and asked that consequential funds come to Scotland and Wales. In recognition of the cost of living crisis, they have also pushed for all volunteer hosts to receive additional thank you payments immediately, rather than after they have already hosted guests for a year. Their letter says, the changes announced amount to a reduction in funding available to help people fleeing Putin's illegal war in Ukraine settle into a new home. In the face of a continued and acute need, it is counterproductive and short-sighted to cut vital funding available to deliver public services to the most vulnerable. It will place local authorities under extreme and unacceptable pressure during an unprecedented cost of living crisis. The letter calls for those arriving from Ukraine to get the same care and support provided to those arriving from Afghanistan or through the UK resettlement scheme. The Scottish and Welsh ministers say that the decision to undermine the success of the safe and legal route to the UK is at odds with the UK government's claims about its generous approach. The letter also says that the additional payments to volunteer hosts are needed now and not after 12 months. It says many hosts have said that without additional financial support, the cost of living crisis means they will not be able to continue. And at a time when public services are under immense housing strain, further avoidable homelessness presentations will mean more and longer stays in inadequate hotel accommodation, resulting in increasing community tensions. A £500 million housing support fund for England only has been reallocated from existing departmental budgets. The letter calls for the £500 million to be considered as a new budget allocation, which would result in consequential funds coming to Scotland and Wales. Rishi Sunak has confirmed that the UK government is considering using powers which allow it to block legislation passed by the Scottish Parliament. Mr Sunak's comment came following reports that the UK's Scottish Secretary, Alistair Jack, threatened to invoke Section 35 of the Scotland Act, which can be used by the UK government to overturn laws in devolved areas which have been passed by the Scottish Parliament. Although Mr Sunak said that the UK government is considering using a Section 35 order because lots of people have got concerns about this new bill in Scotland, about the impact it will have on women's and children's safety, so I think it is completely reasonable for the UK government to have a look at it, there are suspicions in Scotland that the move represents another power grab by the Conservative government. The Scottish government believes that the UK government would need to be highly confident of its legal position to activate Section 35, which has never been used before in the history of the Scottish Parliament. Helena Kennedy, the Scottish KC and Labour peer, told BBC's Today programme she believed it would be an absolute folly to block the bill. The idea that the Scottish Parliament should be overridden by Westminster because the Conservative Party don't like this would really be very disruptive to the unity of the United Kingdom, she said. The Scottish Greens said that any attempt by the UK government to block gender recognition reform would be an attack on devolution and democracy. The UK government is being urged to increase its £10 Christmas bonus by the rate of inflation to provide households with better support over the winter period. The bonus was first introduced in 1972 and is a one-off reserve benefit that automatically gives £10 to those on certain social security payments. However, the payment has not been increased by inflation since its introduction 50 years ago. If it had, it would be worth more than £100, according to the Bank of England's inflation calculator. The SNP MSP Kevin Stewart is calling on the UK government to increase it to that level and has already written to the Chancellor with his request. Commenting, Mr Stewart said, "The UK government's failure to uprate their Christmas bonus alongside spiralling inflation means a one-off £10 payment will make little difference to people's household incomes over the winter. This winter period is going to be particularly tough for households across the country, and the Scottish Government is doing its bit by introducing the winter heating payment, which replaces the Westminster system with one that guarantees a payment no matter the weather. However, the Scottish Government continues to act with one hand tied behind its back by an austerity-obsessed Westminster Government. That is why it is only with the full powers of independence can we build a fairer, more equal Scotland." The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has been urged to give the gift of life at Christmas and to scrap VAT on life-saving defibrillators. The call is being made by SNP MSP Jenny Minto, who has been leading calls for the tax to be scrapped on vital medical equipment. The MSP for Argyll and Bute has previously called on the Chancellor to follow the lead of the Irish government, who scrapped the tax earlier this year. Her campaign has been backed by the Scottish Government and the British Heart Foundation. Now the Chancellor is being urged to show some goodwill at defibrillators cheaper to buy for communities and businesses across the country. Commenting, the SNP MSP Jenny Minto said, "Making sure we have defibrillators in more easily accessible places means anyone suffering from an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest has a greater chance of survival. In my constituency of Argyll and Bute, there has been incredible work to fundraise for defibrillators and ensure that we have coverage across the area. However, those involved in the effort have told me that they would have been able to buy a lot more if defibrillators were not subject to VAT." High fertiliser prices could put an additional 100 million people at risk of undernourishment, a study has suggested. The war in Ukraine has led to a blockade of millions of tonnes of wheat, barley and corn, but reduced food exports from the region are less of a driver of food price rises than feared, researchers have said. Instead, a modelling study led by University of Edinburgh researchers suggests that surging energy and fertiliser prices will have by far the greatest impact on food security in the coming decades. Until now, how energy and fertiliser food price rises and export restrictions affect future global food prices was poorly understood. There had also been little analysis to quantify the scale of harm that hikes in the price of food could have on human nutritional health and the environment. The research team used a global land use computer model to simulate the effects of export restrictions and spikes in production costs on food prices, health, and land use until 2040. Their simulations suggest the combined effect of export restrictions, increased energy costs, and mid-2022 fertiliser prices, which are 3 times higher than at the start of the previous year, could cause food costs to rise by 81% in 2023 compared to 2021 levels. Export restrictions account for only a small fraction of the simulated price rises, the team says. Halting exports from Russia and Ukraine would increase food costs in 2023 by 2.6%, while spikes in energy and fertiliser prices would cause a 74% increase. Food price rises would lead to many people's diets becoming poorer, the team says. The findings suggest there could be up to 1 million additional deaths and more than 100 million people undernourished if high fertiliser prices continue. The greatest increases in deaths would be in sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, and the Middle East. The modelling estimates that sharp increases in the cost of fertilisers, which are key to producing high yields, would greatly reduce their use by farmers. Without fertilisers, more agricultural land is needed to produce the world's food, the team says. The simulations indicate that by 2030, this could increase agricultural land by an area the size of much of Western Europe: Belgium, France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, and the UK combined. This would have severe impacts on deforestation, carbon emissions, and biodiversity loss, the team says. The study is published in the journal Nature Food. It also involved researchers from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany, Rutgers University in the USA, and the University of Aberdeen. Workers in the UK are facing return to 2006 real-term wages during 2023. UK wages next year will fall back to 2006 levels, while 2023 will also bring a slide in house prices and an increase in divorces, according to a forecast that finds the UK is on course to be a less happy place to live. The consultancy firm PwC said a look ahead to 2023 showed that there were few positive indicators, with most measures of the UK's economic and social performance going into reverse. Wages, adjusted for inflation, will fall below those in France, ending a brief period during the pandemic when earnings were higher. PwC said average real wages in the UK would fall from a peak in 2020 of £36,330 to £34,643 next year. Meanwhile, in France, where inflation has been much lower, real wages will only slip back to £35,462 in 2023. Higher taxes are also expected to play a part in making 2023 more difficult for many, with the UK government freezing income tax thresholds again from April while cutting the energy subsidies. An 8% slump in house prices will add to the gloom. Those who treasure the high value of their homes will be upset, and those who might benefit will be unable to take advantage because of higher interest rates. The number of housing market transactions will drop below 1 million for the first time in more than a decade, according to the forecast. One result will be a 20% rise in divorces to almost 140,000 in England and Wales, according to PwC. That's equivalent to 16 divorces every hour. Although the introduction of no-fault divorces in April 2022 will be an important factor spurring the increase. And the cost of living crisis combines with rising unemployment, an increase in bankruptcies, and struggling public services. The main measure of life satisfaction is expected to slump to its lowest level since records began in 2013. The happiness index will drop from a peak of 7.7 in 2019 to 7.3 in 2023, the report has said. Barrett Kupelian, the senior economist at PwC, said the UK economy faced a highly challenging year, and it is not surprising that these chilly headwinds will continue throughout 2023, bringing with it some unwelcome milestones in terms of economic and social well-being measures. 2 people are dead and 4 have been wounded, including 2 in a critical condition after a shooting in central Paris. Le Parisien newspaper reported that a 69-year-old man opened fire on a group of people at the Ahmed Kaya Kurdish Cultural Centre on the Rue d'Enghien in the French capital's 10th arrondissement this morning. Shots were fired at a hairdresser's and a restaurant in the same street, according to the arrondissement's mayor Alexandra Cordebard. Paris prosecutors have said that the police have arrested the alleged gunman and seized his weapon soon after the shooting. The suspect, a French national, was a retired train conductor, according to reports. The suspect is reported to have been wounded. An investigation has been opened for murder, voluntary manslaughter, and aggravated violence, but nothing was yet known about the alleged gunman's motives or whether he had deliberately targeted the Kurdish centre, the prosecutor's office has been quoted as saying. The mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, said psychological assistance would be made available to residents affected by the incident, and the French Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, said he would return to Paris to visit the scene of this dramatic shooting. One witness, a shopkeeper in the street, told Agence France Presse that 7 or 8 shots had been fired, causing chaos. It was just complete panic. Everyone locked themselves in, the woman said. The owner of a restaurant in the street told the news agency that they had seen an old white man enter the cultural centre and open fire. Then he went into the hairdressing salon next door. The congressional panel investigating the January 6 attack on the US Capitol has published its final report, accusing Donald Trump of a multi-part conspiracy to thwart the will of the people and to subvert democracy. Divided into 8 chapters, the 845-page report includes findings, interview transcripts, and legislative recommendations, and represents one of the most damning official portraits of a president in American history. Its release comes just 3 days after the Select Committee recommended criminal charges against Trump and follows media reports that it is cooperating and sharing crucial evidence with the Justice Department. The panel, which will dissolve on the 3rd of January when Republicans take control of the House of Representatives, conducted more than 1,000 interviews, held 10 public hearings, some televised in prime time, and collected more than 1 million documents since forming in July last year. The report presents an in-depth and detailed account of Trump's effort to overturn his defeat by Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election, and what the panel says was his culpability for a violent insurrection by his supporters. It makes the case that Trump knew he lost, but still pressured both state officials and Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the election, then was directly responsible for summoning what became a violent mob, and refused repeated entreaties from his aides to condemn the rioters or to encourage them to leave. In the 2 months between the election and the insurrection, the committee estimates Trump or his inner circle engaged in at least 200 apparent acts of public or private outreach, pressure, or condemnation, targeting either state legislators or state or local election administrators. This included at least 68 meetings, phone calls or text messages, 18 instances of prominent public remarks, and 125 social media posts by Trump or his senior aides. The report adds to political pressure already on the Attorney General Merrick Garland and Jack Smith, the special counsel who is conducting an investigation into the insurrection and Trump's actions. On Monday, at its final public session, the panel unanimously made 4 criminal referrals to the Justice Department against Trump for his role in the insurrection that started with his false claims of a stolen election and ended in the mob siege of the US Capitol. It was the first time in American history that Congress has taken such action against a former president. 5 world-leading academics from the University of St Andrews have been awarded research funding worth a total of almost £2 million from the prestigious Leverhulme Trust. Professor Nina Laurie from the School of Geography and Sustainable Development has been awarded a prestigious Leverhulme Major Research Fellowship worth almost £195,000. Professor Laurie's research project, LMF Development Futures in a COVID Climate-Challenged World, a Decolonial Approach, will use Andean indigenous understandings of time and space to explore new ways of thinking about global development and its possible futures. The project will draw on research carried out in Peru over more than 3 decades by Professor Laurie. Dr. Paulo Annibale, who has received a Research Leadership Award totalling £990,994. Funding will support Dr. Annibale's research into the question of how cell geometry can control local function, using a wide array of innovative physical approaches, inclusive of micro and nanotechnologies and advanced optical microscopes. Professor Manfred Buck from the School of Chemistry has been awarded a Leverhulme Research Project grant worth almost £129,000 for a 2-year exploratory project on metal electrodeposition mediated by carbon nanomembranes. The project will explore new concepts for the generation of metal insulator hybrid nanostructures, which are envisaged to serve as versatile platforms for different technological developments, ranging from flexible circuit boards for nanoelectronics to gated membranes. Dr. Eva Stuken from the School of Earth and Environmental Sciences has been awarded a research project grant worth £185,461 for her project characterizing hydrothermal nutrient fluxes to define the limits on ancient life. This project seeks to address if hydrothermal vents on the sea floor could have been crucial for sustaining Earth's early biosphere and perhaps supercharge the ocean with nutrients during periods of intense volcanic activity. And Professor Peter Wahl from the School of Physics and Astronomy has been awarded funding totalling £363,051 over 42 months for his project Solving Superconductivity in Ruthenate, which will start in March 2023. The research will focus on superconductivity, that's the ability to transport charges with no losses, which promises new, more energy-efficient technologies. Since its foundation in 1925, the Leverhulme Trust has provided grants and scholarships for research and education across all academic disciplines. Today, it is one of the largest all-subject providers of research funding in the UK, distributing approximately £100 million each year. Improvements to the existing Old Military Road through the Glen Crow corridor are being made to make it a more resilient diversion route until the long-term solution to the problems at the Rest and Be Thankful is in place. Of the medium-term options under consideration, the improvements to the Old Military Road will improve the resilience of the diversion route, reduce journey times, are the quickest to implement, are of relatively lower cost, and would have the least impacts overall across a range of criteria assessed. A detailed programme for the proposed improvements will now be developed. These include debris catch fences, temporary bunds, drainage improvements, and widening and discrete realignment to improve bends and avoid flooding. It is expected that these works will be carried out on a phased basis starting later next year. Transport Scotland expects to provide further information on the timescales and delivery of the programme of works to the Old Military Road in the next A83 Task Force meeting when it meets in Argyll at the end of January. The Transport Minister, Jenny Gilruth, said, "The Scottish Government remains committed to a long-term solution to the landslip risks of the A83 Rest and Be Thankful. There is a clear need for pace and urgency on delivering these improvements, and I recognise that communities have been waiting for many years to see the action that is required." Meantime, consultants have now identified improvements to the existing Old Military Road to create a more resilient diversion route through Glen Crow, while the long-term solution is being developed. These improvements will mean more certainty for locals and road users if the A83 is shut due to adverse weather conditions. Transport Scotland will provide more details of the improvements planned to the Old Military Road at the next A83 Task Force meeting in Argyll in January. And that is all that we have time for you for this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station and to make new programmes for you. Our programmes will always be free to view, but if you can afford £5 per month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of raising £30,000 to enable us to employ staff to make programmes and to pay all of our bills. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment as a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, thank you very much. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras or in any other way, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot. Please like and retweet us there. And you can also find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. Just click on the wee bell. Next week, we will be broadcasting a series of full Scottish Review 22 specials, so please tune in each day next week from 12 noon to watch those specials. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has been watching this evening and indeed watching throughout 2022. I hope that you have a very peaceful evening and a very Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.